In the last decade, gaming has become bigger than the music and movie industry combined, with some of the top games earning more than the big blockbusters.
This is amazing!
And this insane success means that massive companies are willing to invest mass amounts of resources into these games. This ends up producing some of the most beautiful and detailed games that are sometimes indistinguishable from reality. However, do you ever find yourself logging in to play a game, but you can't really find anything to play? You then sit and stare at a blank screen, scrolling through a Steam library full of games, but none of them actually interest you? How does this happen? Today, games look and play amazingly in comparison to games 10 years ago. They run at higher FPS, look visually incredible, and run like butter. So logically, you should be having more fun. But you're not. You feel like you're getting bored, no new game excites you, and every time you buy a AAA title, you feel like you just got robbed.
Whoa! Okay, I'll buy your game.
Are you getting old? Or are video games just being robbed of their soul and personalities by companies who just want to make a profit for their investors? Let's start at the beginning.
Video arcades of America. 1 billion games are played every month.
In the beginning, gaming was pretty simple. You had a few basic controls, very simple graphics, and some sound effects. But despite this simple concept, people were hooked.
You can get hooked on it.
Are you?
Yeah.
According to Wikipedia, by 1980, 86% of 13 to 20-year-olds in America had played arcade games. And by 1981, there were more than 35 million people visiting arcades regularly. Some of the most popular games at this time were Pong, Pac-Man, and Tetris. In fact, these games would go on and thrive well into the 2000s. But how? Let's look at Tetris. It's an incredibly simple game. All you have to do is prevent the blocks from stacking and reaching the top of the screen. But despite this, Tetris is one of the best-selling games of all time with an estimated 100 million sales. Tetris also set a Guinness World Record for the most ported video game of all time, with it being available on 65 platforms. But as time went on, technology would rapidly grow, allowing game developers to create more detailed and in-depth games. Which leads us into the next generation. The PlayStation 2, the most popular console of all time with 155 million units sold worldwide. And not only that, it had 3,874 games released for it. Now this is where I come in. I started gaming around the time when the PS2 was the king of the consoles, and to me, this was when gaming was arguably at its funnest. This is when you could walk into a shop and buy a new game for less than £20. You would then take this game home, complete it like 4 times over, and then lend it out to a friend who never actually gave you it back. There was no digital ownership and no downloads required, so you could easily bring them to a friend's house and play in their console. As well as this, you also had the next generation consoles that were just announced. Some had familiar concepts and some not so familiar. The next gen was promising though, with insane technology that would allow developers to create massive and beautiful looking games, which to my then 8-year-old brain would be very confusing, because I used to think, how could games get any better than GTA San Andreas and Spider-Man 2? This was a very exciting time. This excitement would carry on for a few years into the next generation, with masterpieces being released like Modern Warfare 2, Grand Theft Auto 5 and Call of Duty Ghosts. Wait a minute, who put that on my script? This time period was incredibly exciting because everything was still kind of new, and the rate at which gameplay and graphics improved was insane compared to today. Just look at the graphics and gameplay of GTA San Andreas and then compare it to GTA 4, which was released under 4 years later. It was night and day difference. This was also a time when you had a lot of developers who were trying a lot of different things. This was because they weren't forced to follow industry trends to maximize sales yet. An example of this was World at War Zombies. We got this game mode because a few developers within Treyarch decided to make it on the site, and then everyone in the office started to love it. They then made the ballsy move of including it in the final game, and it paid off because it's now a stable PvE game within most COD titles. This probably wouldn't really happen anymore, as most games nowadays are massive in scale and the developers are forced to work overtime just to get the base game out the door. But this was also the time that online gaming was becoming massively popular, and it was completely changing the way games were played. At this point, DLC/loot boxes weren't a massive crutch yet. But were all these things really that good? Yes, but I do think nostalgia plays into why we think gaming isn't as fun anymore. Think about it, you were younger, you had less responsibility and a lot more free time. On top of that, so did your friends, so you could sit up all night playing games and having fun.
I'm over here stroking my dick, I got lotion on my dick.
Plus, you were younger and probably less developed. Simple games could immerse you and hold your attention with easier tactics. And then if you add the internet into the mix, there's no mystery or challenge within games anymore. Do you remember the Bigfoot phenomenon in GTA San Andreas? Or playing missions that you would be stuck on and you'd have to get your dad to help you. Yeah, these things don't really exist anymore because the internet is full of people who Easter egg hunt, debunk, and create guides for these exact things. And when you're able to just Google and solve something within 30 seconds, it removes a lot of the challenge and fun from it. But it was still arguably more enjoyable a few years ago when developers and companies had a lot more creative say of what goes into their games. People used to build games because it was fun. And now some games are only built because they are profitable.
Activision Blizzard released its first quarter earnings report for 2015, and it showed the company earned $1.28 billion US in revenue for the quarterly period ending March 31st, 2015. As the company raised its full year forecast, expecting full year revenues of $4.44 billion.
Money is the cause of a lot of problems with AAA games. Companies want a game that appeals to the largest audience possible, and they want it to be built as quickly as possible. This maximizes their sales and profits, which isn't an inherently bad thing, but when you focus on generating sales, you remove that passion from game design that created Grand Theft Auto, Half-Life, and Minecraft. This is why we are starting to see so many trend-following games that are unfinished and released just in time for Christmas. More sales equal happy investors, but prioritizing sales over game quality is literally killing modern day games. Just look at Cyberpunk.
Wake the fuck up, mommy. I pissed the bed.
Released on December 10th, 2020, Cyberpunk had arguably the most embarrassing launch of all time. For the price of $50, you got a game that was so buggy it was unplayable. It had loads of cut content that they previously advertised. The next generation game mechanics and AI that was hyped up didn't work, or was worse than GTA San Andreas that was released 18 years ago. And if that wasn't shitty enough, the game ran like a seal. What's that? Seals can't run? Yeah, exactly. The game was released on all platforms, including the old gen consoles, and it just wasn't optimized. People with RTX 3090s and their £2,000 PCs struggle to get a steady frame rate. So how the fuck did you expect a PS4 that sounds like a plane taking off to run it? How does this happen to a AAA game? A game that belongs to a company valued at $8.1 billion. A company that also previously produced the masterpiece that is The Witcher 3. We can't say for certain because it very well could have been an accident. But I'd like to think these guys aren't stupid. They were bound to have people playing their game and saying, hey, this doesn't run very well. And they must have, because they refused to give out review copies for the console versions of the game. Like, if you thought your game was the next best thing, why wouldn't you give out review copies? Plus, the game was released in December, a time in which game sales are very, very high. This would heavily increase the company's profits, making for a very good end-of-year meeting with their investors. But we can't say for sure because we weren't involved in the decision to release this unfinished game. However, this is becoming quite a common problem amongst most large game titles. Take a look at Call of Duty, released every year for about £50 in November. But upon release, the game is incredibly buggy, it has so little content that I get bored of it within a month. It takes them so long to patch the bugs and add additional content that by the time they do it, they're already hyping up the next COD. Battlefield 2042 was the same. It was buggy upon release and lacked a lot of common features that an FPS game typically has, like voice chat, scoreboards, leaderboards, etc. Which isn't a big deal, but the developers came out and said that their fans had too high of expectations when they complained about these legacy features not being in the game, which in my opinion, I thought this was pretty disrespectful. The Ackman did an incredible video on this if you want to learn more. And finally, Grand Theft Auto The Definitely Shite Edition. They released a small teaser trailer out of nowhere saying the game was going to be released in 1 month. I know, look at that, just in time for Christmas. To my knowledge, no review copies were sent out, no gameplay was shown, and they said that the original version of the games would no longer be on sale once they released this new edition. In my opinion, there is so much wrong with what I just said. Number 1, we can only guess, but surely they knew the game wouldn't live up to their standard, hence why there was little to no gameplay shown, and no review copies were given out before the official release. Number 2, as we know, games sell really well at Christmas, so Rockstar released a remastered version of their most loved game series just in time for Christmas, which would be fine if the game wasn't a buggy, unfinished, upscale abomination. Number 3, they lit a fire under their customers' asses by saying, hey, you either buy the original copies of the game now, or you will never be able to, which causes their customers to buy the original games and the remastered version, increasing their sales. But what makes this worse is that the original games were then allowed to be sold to PC players again due to the remastered versions being such a huge disappointment. Bonus number 4. They sued their own fans. They sued the modding community who arguably done a better job at keeping the older games alive than Rockstar could. But this reoccurring issue of release the game now, fix it later, in my opinion is not okay. If I'm paying full price for your game on its release date, I should not have to wait months for it to be fixed. Mistakes can happen and that's fine. Small bugs and issues are completely understandable, but this is such a common, large-scale occurrence across a lot of newly released titles, I'm starting to think it's not a mistake. Please give your developers time to finish and properly test your games. We, the consumers, are happy to wait for a fully fleshed out game, even though your investors won't be happy. But these aren't the only problems with modern day games. DLCs used to be a nice addition to games. It brought new life into an old game that you were playing, and they were usually good value for money. Depending on the game, you normally got additional content in the forms of multiplayer maps, new weapons, outfits, story missions, and items. You got all of these together for about $10 to $20, but like a lot of things in this industry, the price went up and the content went down. Nowadays, most DLC/microtransactions are just skins and novelty items that don't add any real value to your game, and they charge the same fucking price. Depending on the game, a reskin for a gun alone is like $15. Yes, you have things like season passes that normally are $5 to $10 and give you like 100 items, but let's be honest, 90 of those items are just shit. 9 of them are okay, and 1 is usually decent. The really cool skins, on the other hand, you'll have to pay for them individually, and per item they can be up to $30 for a single cosmetic item that adds no value to your game. Rewind about 14 years, you were able to buy GTA Ballad of Gay Tony for a price of about $20 back in the day, and this DLC was essentially an entire brand new GTA game. But no, now you have a vehicle on GTA Online that is valued at $32. How is this normal? Yes, you can earn the money in-game, I get that, but why is it normal to charge these types of prices for useless virtual crap? GTA Online isn't the only one that is guilty of this. Many other games implement these microtransactions as a way of generating consistent monthly revenue for their games. I do believe these microtransactions can fit in just fine with some games, particularly free-to-play games, but they need to produce decent content and price it fairly. And in my opinion, a lot of these games do not price them fairly and follow some very shady practices. Cough cough, child gambling, cough cough. But I particularly hate microtransactions in buggy, unfinished games that I have to pay full price for, especially games that literally create dumb skins that do not fit in with the theme of the game whatsoever because they are funny and likely will sell well. I don't think King Kong throwing Snoop Dogg off a building is historically accurate. The problem with modern day gaming is money. Due to gaming being a tightened industry, these large AAA games seem to be driven by sales. And as a result of this, we get unfinished games that are rushed out just in time for Christmas. The creativity of these games are limited, crunch times are at an all-time high, and the developers are forced to follow industry trends to ensure their large-scale game sells to a large audience. Modern day gaming isn't terrible. It just uses a few scummy practices to squeeze every last drop of money out from the consumer. And it's not every game, it just primarily seems to be larger budget games. Pair these problems with your nostalgia for the good old days, and this is why you feel like modern day gaming isn't as good. But don't worry, history always repeats itself. And soon we'll be right back playing the next Half-Life, Modern Warfare 2, Grand Theft Auto 5, Minecraft or Fortnite, and we'll be right back in those good old days.
Ready to talk a lot of smack online?
Of course, you have to. If you don't, then you're a sucker.
What's the favorite?
Thanks for watching.